Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about something fundamental to life at the cellular level: how substances move in and out of cells. Cells are the basic units of life, and to function properly, they need to constantly exchange materials with their environment. This process of material movement is known as transport. There are two main types of transport in cells: passive transport and active transport. Let's break down what these are, how they work, and why they're so important for living organisms. There are two main systems through which substances move in and out of cells. Passive transport. This is the movement of substances without the use of energy. It happens naturally, relying on the concentration gradient, the difference in the amount of a substance between two areas. Active transport, on the other hand, is a type of transport that requires energy because substances are moved against their concentration gradient, which means from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Both types of transport are essential for cells to maintain their functions, but they work in different ways. Let's dive deeper into each one. Transport in cells refers to the process of moving molecules and ions in and out of the cell. This can happen through the cell membrane, which is semi-permeable, meaning it allows certain substances to pass while blocking others. There are two broad categories of transport. Again, it's the passive transport and active transport. Passive transport is when substances move across the cell membrane without the need for energy, or ATP. It is driven by the concentration gradient, which is the difference in the concentration of a substance inside and outside the cell. Because passive transport doesn't require energy, it's a natural process that occurs automatically, and there are three main types of passive transport: diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Let's look at each type of passive transport in more detail. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration until equilibrium is reached. This is where concentrations are equal. For example, if you open a bottle of perfume in a room, the fragrance molecules will spread out from the area of high concentration to areas of lower concentration. Another example is when oxygen moving from the lungs into the bloodstream is a type of diffusion, as oxygen moves from the area of higher concentration, which is in the lungs, to the area of lower concentration, which is in the blood. Diffusion happens naturally and doesn't require energy. It is essential for the movement of gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide across cell membranes. Now let's talk about facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion is a type of diffusion, but it involves the use of transport proteins to help larger or charged molecules pass through the membrane. These molecules can't directly diffuse through the lipid bilayer, so they need assistance. For example, glucose molecules enter the cell through a glucose transporter protein in the membrane. Another example are ions like sodium or potassium move across the membrane through ion channels. Facilitated diffusion, like regular diffusion, moves substances from high to low concentration, but it requires a protein to assist the process. Another type is osmosis. Osmosis is a specific type of facilitated diffusion that refers to the movement of water molecules across a selectively permeable membrane. Water moves from an area of lower solute concentration to higher solute concentration. For example, if you place a raisin in a cup of water, the water will enter the raisin because the raisin has a higher concentration of solutes like sugars, and the water moves to balance the concentration. In plant cells, water moves into the roots from the soil by osmosis, helping the plant stay hydrated. Osmosis is a vital for maintaining the water balance in cells, and it is driven by the concentration of solutes inside and outside the cell. Now, let's talk about active transport. This is a process where substances move against their concentration gradient, which means from an area of low concentration to high concentration. Because this type of transport works against natural diffusion and it goes from low to high concentration, it requires energy in the form of ATP or adenosine triphosphate. There are two main types of active transport. The primary active transport, which uses ATP directly to move ions or molecules across the membrane. Example, the sodium-potassium pump, which moves sodium ions out of the cell and potassium ions into the cell, both against their concentration gradients. Another type is secondary active transport. This uses energy indirectly by relying on the ion gradient created by primary active transport. It often involves coupled transport where one molecule moves with the gradient and another moves against it. Example is Simport systems where glucose enters the cell with sodium ions, taking advantage of the sodium gradient created by the sodium-potassium pump. Next is the sodium-potassium pump. This is a perfect example of primary active transport. It uses ATP to move 3 sodium ions, or Na+, out of the cell, and 2 potassium ions, or K+, into the cell. This creates a concentration gradient and is essential for maintaining the resting membrane potential, which is important for nerve function and helping cells maintain the right volume and balance of ions. Example is nerve cells use this pump to generate electrical signals for communication across the body. Besides the pump, cells can also use vesicles to move large molecules in and out. This is where endocytosis and exocytosis come in. Endocytosis is the process by which a cell takes in large substances by engulfing them in a vesicle formed from the cell membrane. Example is white blood cells engulf bacteria through phagocytosis, which is a type of endocytosis. Exocytosis is the process by which cells release large substances to the outside by merging a vesicle within the membrane. Example of this is nerve cells releasing neurotransmitters into the synapse. Both of these processes require energy because the cell is moving large amounts of material. Let's recap the key differences between passive and active transport. Active transport needs energy and it moves across or against the concentration gradient. On the other hand, passive transport does not require energy or does not require ATP, and it moves with the concentration gradient. Both passive and active transport are vital for, first, maintaining homeostasis. This is balancing the concentration of ions, water, and other substances within the cell. It's also important for energy production. Active transport plays a role in the functioning of cells like muscle cells and nerve cells. Also, it is involved in nutrient and waste removal. Active transport helps cells absorb nutrients and get rid of waste materials, ensuring survival. Without these transport systems, cells wouldn't be able to function properly, leading to problems in growth, communication, and overall health. In conclusion, cell transport is a crucial process that allows substances to enter and exit the cell, whether through passive transport, which again does not require energy, or active transport, which uses energy. Cells can maintain balance and carry out necessary functions. By understanding how these processes work, we can see how complex and efficient life at the cellular level really is. Thank you for your attention. See you in the next module. Bye bye.